Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, May 4th. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. It's the news many Californians have been waiting for. Governor Newsom says he's ready to let more businesses reopen. We'll break that down in a moment. But first, though, here in San Diego County, 5 more deaths and 93 new cases were reported. As KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman tells us, workers are accusing the county of not doing enough to keep them safe.
Today, essential San Diego County workers staged a vehicle caravan in Kearny Mesa calling for resources to stay safe during the pandemic. County officials say they are doing their best, but Union SEIU Local 221 says there's a lack of protective equipment for healthcare workers, and they're demanding hazard pay.
And so these workers are out on the front lines every day, and it seems appropriate. I was a Marine, and when we went into harm's way, we received combat pay. It was a recognition of the increased danger that we were going into and what we were facing.
County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher supports hazard pay for county workers. He's asking the Board of Supervisors to look into bumping their salaries using federal CARES Act dollars. He also wants to create a fund to offset the cost of childcare for essential workers.
The reality is the need is much greater than what is presently available, and this $5 million contribution will help.
If the guidelines are met and modifications are made, then people can start reopening.
In Sacramento, California Governor Gavin Newsom today saying some retail businesses will be allowed to reopen by the end of the week. That doesn't include shopping malls or dining in at restaurants, but
clothing, bookstores, music, toys, sporting goods stores, florists with Mother's Day coming up.
The state will release reopening guidelines later this week, but local communities do not have to begin easing restrictions.
If they choose not to come into compliance with the state guidelines, they have that right.
Counties can also make plans to further relax restrictions, but that will require state approval.
The possibility of counties being able to make a decision to move a little further than that based on preparing a readiness plan. We expect to get the guidance on what goes into that, the parameters around what they would like to see.
County Supervisors Nathan Fletcher and Greg Cox are presenting a framework for businesses to reopen at tomorrow's Board of Supervisor meeting.
Well, we expect, based on where we are now, in terms of our overall progress in tackling coronavirus, that we would be able to move consistent with the state on Friday.
That means some retail businesses could start to reopen this week in San Diego. The governor says indicators like hospitalizations and testing capacity are driving decisions, but it can be all taken away if numbers start trending up. He says as we move to reopen, we'll need to be able to quickly track, trace, and isolate the virus. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Several North County beaches are back open for limited activities, including surfing, running, and walking. The city of Del Mar reopened its beaches today, along with Solana Beach, Carlsbad, and a few state beaches in the area. Cardiff beaches reopened over the weekend, and Encinitas reopened last week. Del Mar's chief lifeguard says the vast majority of people are following the rules.
People were out early. We started today at 5:30 and there were already surfers in the water, people enjoying walking, running on the beach. Probably 98% of the people had a really good understanding of that and were really respectful of this new paradigm in which we are enjoying this open space.
Del Mar lifeguards have the authority to issue citations to rule breakers, but the department says it's focusing on public education and not enforcement. With federal social distancing guidelines expired, more than 40 states will have relaxed some restrictions by the end of the week. But health officials are warning that reopening the country too quickly is highly risky. Karen Caifa has the latest from Washington.
Washington awakens amid the coronavirus crisis, from the crowded National Mall to the empty chambers of the Supreme Court.
Oh, yay. Oh, yay. Oh, yay.
For the first time in history, justices hear oral arguments via teleconference as the highest court in the land adapts to the COVID-19 pandemic.
The court is now sitting.
Senators return to Capitol Hill while members of the House work from home.
You've got to get Congress working again. It is essential that we work.
That mindset is felt across the country as states start to relax restrictions. The reopenings meant to revive a stalled economy and calm restless residents, but come with potentially fatal consequences.
It's not like you go out today and we're going to see a spike tomorrow, but rather because there's a lag of time between when you get infected and when you start showing symptoms. And then another lag of time between that and when people become very ill or succumb to the illness. I think that's the problem.
A model from the Trump administration predicts the number of deaths from the coronavirus could double to about 3,000 a day by June 1st. That is according to an internal document obtained by the New York Times. The troubling projection underscores a sobering reality. The COVID-19 emergency may not end anytime soon. In Washington, Karen Kafa, KPBS News.
The San Diego City Council is reviewing the mayor's proposed budget, which includes deep cuts to city services. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says this is just the beginning of a long-running budget crisis.
The budget contains historic cuts that impact every city service: libraries, parks and recreation, tree trimming, road maintenance, arts and culture funding, even police. And given the uncertainty surrounding the pandemic's lasting economic impacts, things could get even worse.
We are not at bottom yet. We don't know where the bottom is, when this is going to end. And so we are doing the best we can to project out. But those projections really don't mean much until we start to see where the bottom is and we start to turn around on this, on the health side. That will then impact the economic side.
The industries hardest hit by the pandemic, tourism, hospitality, and retail, also employ high numbers of low-income workers. Council President Georgette Gomez says this means the city's historically disadvantaged neighborhoods, from City Heights to Logan Heights to San Ysidro, are feeling the economic crisis much more acutely than better-off neighborhoods.
Over 30% of our population is unemployed right now, and I only hope that as we're moving forward and we're making these decisions of cutting services that are really important to these districts, that we keep that in mind. It's very important.
The budget review hearings are continuing all week, with each city department under the council's microscope. The mayor's revised budget is due out in 2 weeks, with more cuts likely. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
The Sheriff's Department is investigating after a man wore a Ku Klux Klan hood in a Santee grocery store, sparking outrage online and from local leaders. The spokeswoman for Vons said he was asked to take off the hood or leave the store on Saturday. Santee Mayor John Minto and County Supervisor Diane Jacob condemned the man, saying racism has no place in this county. The regional director for the Anti-Defamation League says it sent a clear message.
This is a symbol that everybody knows what this is. It's a hate symbol from a hate group. And it's a very clear message that this person is trying to send. And I think that's the important piece, that there's no nuance around this. This is hate outright. And the way the mayor stepped up, the city council, I just feel that they understand the importance of what this potentially could have meant to the community as far as a hate symbol. And they stood up and said, no, this is not going to happen here.
The Sheriff's Department says it was not called at the time of the incident. Detectives are looking into it and may pursue criminal charges. Our partners at iNewsSource have obtained emails that show warnings about gaps in mental health care at a county-run hotel for people experiencing homelessness. One person died by suicide at the Crowne Plaza in Mission Valley. iNewsSource investigative reporter Cody Delaney has more.
The emails iNewsSource obtained show multiple suicide attempts had taken place at the Crowne Plaza since the county started using it to isolate people with COVID-19 symptoms. County spokesman Michael Workman says every person at the hotel is given a phone number to call for help and receives daily wellness checks. Homeless advocate Michael McConnell urged the county to re-examine what is being done to support the people who need to isolate and are staying at county-run hotels.
They should know that they're putting folks in there who can have challenges.
And you have to be prepared to meet those challenges and be there to support folks.
For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource investigative reporter Cody Delaney.
And iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. San Diego is going to get a blast of hot, dry air this week, and local fire officials say they are bracing for extra activity. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has more.
The temperature will climb well above normal in San Diego County this week as a high-pressure system pushes hot, dry desert air over the mountains and to the coast.
We're not expecting strong Santa Ana winds, but they will be coming out of that direction.
Casey Oswand is a National Weather Service forecaster. She says the desert community of Anzo Borrego will likely be the region's hotspot.
And they usually see an average max temperature of about 93 degrees. But for Wednesday and Thursday, we are forecasting that their high temperatures could reach as high as 106 degrees.
That hot, dry air will also be sapping moisture from all those plants that were fed by the region's above-average rainfall last month. That increases chances of a wildfire gaining a foothold. But CAL FIRE officials say they're ready. They plan to try to snuff out wildfires before they get too large.
We know it's frustrating to be doing their defensible space around their home, and the grasses seem to just keep coming up, but we really need people to start looking at their clearance, start seeing what's around their home, and start doing their part in clearing a lot of those annual grasses, because that's ultimately what's going to carry fire up to their home.
And while this hot weather and the accompanying fire risk may be unusual for this time of year now, climate scientists have long been saying that the chances for these early season heat waves is going to go up as the climate warms. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Hundreds of thousands in San Diego County have been laid off because of the pandemic, and many of those out of work are looking for all the help that they can get. South Hills Church in San Diego Southeast responded to that need today with a drive-through food distribution near Paradise Hills. The church gave out 30,000 pounds of food and drinks, some rolls of toilet paper, and more than 50,000 diapers. South Hills Pastor Ryan McFadden says the whole point is to help residents in the community.
This is the start. This is going to be a continuous thing. We want everyone in our community to know that when there is a need out there, that South Hills Church is going to be at the front lines providing that.
South Hills Church says this is only the beginning, and as long as there is demand, they will host more food distributions. An African fashion designer in City Heights had to close her doors because of the pandemic, but she's finding a new stream of revenue by making the now mandatory face masks more fashionable. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler has the story.
Lily Clue had only moved into her new El Cajon Boulevard storefront a few months ago when she was forced to close her doors because of the pandemic. Clue, who immigrated from Togo in West Africa almost 20 years ago, had seen her business outgrow two other storefronts. Her stylish African fabrics and modern sensibility festoon her now shuttered store, where she'd do fittings and custom design outfits for her clients. But Clue, who's raising two teenagers, didn't let the pandemic stop her from being part of the bleeding edge of fashion. She's now using her fabrics to make a line of stylish face masks.
Everybody can wear the hospital mask. No, we're going to be making an African fabric, which African fabric is always quantity, like all cotton and then comfortable. We can do that and still make it fashion. Even though, it's a mask, but it has to be classic.
While Lily had never made a mask before, she says she didn't need to use a pattern to figure it out. She showed us she makes them in less than 10 minutes. She's also branched out to matching headscarves and coverings for doctors.
Yeah, because we don't know how long it's going to take. And even though when people come back, they are not thinking about, wearing clothes right now. It's a lot of stuff, a lot of bills I have to pay, all those ones. So I'm worried.
She's selling the masks on her Facebook page in the hope that by bringing a little style to grim times, she'll be able to weather the economic storm and get back to the dresses, shirts, and jackets she's become known for.
I always like to do my stuff different. And it has to be fashionable. Something has to be different, and people can pay attention to it. So that's part of business too.
Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
And a few reminders about face coverings. They're now required in public and can be as simple as a scarf or a homemade cloth mask. The CDC recommends routinely running it through the washing machine depending on how often you use it. Also, avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth when you take it off, and then wash your hands immediately. We're following all of the latest coronavirus developments for you at kpbs.org. Click on the Tracking COVID-19 link on our homepage, and you'll be taken to a page with all of our recent reports. We are enjoying sunny skies across the county, but it's about to get hot. Mark Mancuso has your forecast.
As we take a look at our weather headlines, well, it's back. The heat's making a comeback this week. Temperatures will be on the rise. Looks like the heat will peak here from Wednesday into Thursday. Temperatures anywhere from 10 to almost 20 degrees above average. Does look like the onshore flow does return Friday into the weekend, so we'll start to see a little bit of cooling spreading inland. Might take a while for the desert to see anything like that. And with the heat on the rise, we have heat advisories, excessive heat warnings. They'll be going into effect during the day on Tuesday. So temperatures are going to be rising on up. For tonight, patchy low clouds right near the coast, down to 58 in Oceanside. Borrego Springs, nice and mild tonight. Forecast low, 71. Campo dips down to 44. That's refreshing. Now for Tuesday, there you see it. Temperatures well above the averages here as a high pressure starts to build back over the region. And it does look like we'll have plenty of sizzling sunshine for you. Borrego Springs up to 104. Ramona's at 89. El Cajon 93. And there you can see closer to the coast. Even here, temperature is rising to near 80 degrees. On Wednesday and Thursday, well, that offshore flow, and we're looking at the hottest of the days with very low humidities. Looking at our extended forecast along the coast, you can see how it's going to be very warm, and temperatures may back off a little bit here as we head towards the weekend. Inland areas, temperatures soaring into the 90s. It's going to be hot here, and then later in the week, into the weekend, not quite as hot. Mountain areas, temperatures here showing some easing towards the weekend. And in the deserts, well, you can see it stays really hot here. Very little relief. For KBBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
Scientists, health officials, and even President Trump all have different ideas about when the world will have a coronavirus vaccine. And in some cases, the timelines are in direct conflict with each other. Elizabeth Cohen explains why.
Sunday night, President Trump was quite sure about the prospect of a vaccine against COVID-19.
We are very confident that we're going to have a vaccine at the end of the year. By the end of the year, have a vaccine.
But not everyone seems so sure. Dr. Deborah Birx, coordinator of the White House coronavirus response, was cautious Sunday about whether a vaccine would be ready by January, saying it depended on the progress of clinical trials.
On paper, it's possible. It's whether we can execute around the globe.
Dr. Anthony Fauci also cautious, saying January is possible, but
what might happen is that people months from now will say, well, you said we were going to have a vaccine in January. I didn't say that. I said we're going to shoot to be able to have one.
And a scientist at the University of Oxford had to walk back a statement his colleague made that she was 80% confident the Oxford vaccine would work.
I certainly wouldn't put the possibility at 80%. That's a pretty big number.
While the world waits for a vaccine, several U.S. teams, at the company Regeneron, for example, and at Vanderbilt University, are working on a treatment for people infected with COVID-19 that could come along faster. It's called a monoclonal antibody. They hope to start studies in the coming months. People who've survived COVID-19 develop antibodies to the virus. Scientists take the most powerful antibodies and synthesize them in a lab and give them as a drug to people sick with coronavirus. And for now, coronavirus patients have remdesivir, the first drug that's been shown to have an impact against coronavirus in a clinical trial.
We intend to get that to patients in the early part of this next week, beginning to work with the government, which will determine which cities are most vulnerable.
We don't know if remdesivir saves lives. Early results are inconclusive, but it did shave 4 days off recovery time for hospitalized patients. That's why scientists continue to look for something even better against COVID-19.
And that was Elizabeth Cohen reporting. 10,000 volunteers are needed for a study that hopes to determine how many Americans have been infected by COVID-19 without even knowing it. Mandy Gaither has more.
It's aimed at figuring out the true magnitude of the pandemic in the U.S. and to identify which communities are most affected by it. Researchers with the National Institutes of Health are working to confirm how many American adults without a confirmed coronavirus infection have in fact carried the virus but had mild symptoms, undocumented illness, or didn't have access to testing when they were sick. Researchers will collect and analyze blood samples from as many as 10,000 volunteers, searching for antibodies or proteins the immune system produces to fight a specific infectious agent. Researchers say current testing of patients known to be infected only identifies active infection, not those who have recovered. In blood samples found to contain antibodies, researchers may perform further tests to evaluate the volunteers' immune responses to the virus. This data may provide insight as to why these cases were less severe than those that led to hospitalization. For today's Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
With face coverings now required countywide, that order applies to the San Diego International Airport. The airport has also marked floors at security checkpoints, airline ticket counters, and concession areas to adhere to 6-foot social distancing rules. As more states begin to ease stay-at-home orders, major U.S. airlines are updating their safety protocols. Pete Munstein has more.
A scene too similar to travel before this pandemic. New videos of packed planes, passengers bottled up in rows and aisles, raising new fears about social distancing when flying, and new calls to restrict air travel even further. This week, JetBlue became the first airline to require passengers to wear masks, its COO calling it the new flying etiquette. Now, all major U.S. airlines, Alaska, American, Delta, Frontier, Southwest, and United, have volunteered to do the same. But the leader of the Association of Flight Attendants goes further, telling CNN there must be a federal ban of leisure travel by air.
Because the flights have been pulled down, we're seeing more and more full flights without policies that really address proper social distancing.
But the nation's air travel is at a virtual halt. Nearly half of all commercial jetliners are now parked. The TSA says only 5% of passengers are passing through checkpoints compared to a year ago.
Thanks.
I set out to see what it's like to fly right now, traveling from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta and back.
It's hard to find someone not already wearing a mask.
Airlines are stepping up their use of electrostatic sprayers to disinfect passenger cabins.
Crews handed out this Purell wipe as we got on board.
Airlines are also not booking middle seats,
in accordance with social distance,
hoping to keep up social distancing on board. Industry groups say the average domestic flight is now carrying 17 passengers, up from 10 passengers just over a week ago.
I think the people that are traveling are probably healthy. They're not ill or critical or in a bad situation.
Everybody should be wearing a mask.
The Department of Transportation gave airlines permission to start scaling back service to small city airports. Planemaker Boeing CEO is forecasting a years-long recovery for airlines. Even still, the industry is holding out hope that new measures will mean a new normal of flying again.
We're hopeful that that will happen.
And that was Pete Munstein reporting. United Airlines, Delta, and JetBlue require masks to be worn on planes starting today. American Airlines, Alaska, and Southwest begin the new policy on May 11th.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, as states look to reopen, one new government model predicts 3,000 deaths every day in the U.S. by June 1st. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Invasive and potentially deadly bugs known as murder hornets are now in the United States. Asian giant hornets have been found attacking beehives in Washington state. Researchers gave them the nickname murder hornet because their venomous sting can kill a human if stung several times. They're also strong enough to puncture a beekeeper's suit. Scientists don't yet know how the Hornets made it to the United States. San Diego researchers used a new satellite to track how much ice the planet's coldest regions are losing. The first laser measurements from the recently launched satellite produced very detailed maps. Scripps Institution of Oceanography researchers say compared to data gathered 16 years ago, the ice sheets got significantly smaller.
We have an accelerating amount of ice coming off these ice sheets. And so the big question for the next few decades and coming centuries in terms of planning is how much ice are we going to lose and how quickly are we going to lose it?
The region lost enough ice between 2003 and 2019 to fill Lake Michigan. Researchers say using the satellite information is key to understanding the ice shelves because it would be impossible to gather that data from the ground. The findings are published in the journal Science. An update on today's top story. Today, Governor Newsom said some retail businesses will be allowed to reopen by the end of the week. That doesn't include shopping malls or dining in at restaurants, but clothing and sporting goods stores, florists, and bookstores could reopen for pickup. The state will release reopening guidelines later this week. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.